That's an absolutely incredible goal from Ronan Grant.
Welcome to the CPL Newsroom presented by Volkswagen for the first time in 2025. Charlie O'Connor-Clark alongside Mitchell Tierney, and the CPL is back. Mitch, we had 4 incredible games over the weekend, starting in Ottawa and ending in Vancouver. Lots of fun, lots of goals, a little bit of rain, I think, which is
a lot of rain.
Good one. It was cold in Ottawa for sure, but a lot to talk about this week as the CPL is finally back. I was in Ottawa. Mitch, you were watching along all 4 games as you could over the weekend, but we're going to start this week where the season started, in the nation's capital, where it was rainy and it was wet. Atlético Ottawa 2, Halifax Wanderers 2. First half of this game, it looked kind of like the Wanderers were ascendant and were playing some of the best football I think we've ever seen them play. But in the second half, they scored that second goal almost immediately after halftime. But then what do you know? It is a new Atlético Ottawa this year under Diego Mejia. For I think just the 3rd time in club history, they came from two goals behind to get a point out of this game, thanks to some incredible heroics from a Mexican loanee, David Rodriguez. Great play from Sam Salter, as well as some heroics off the bench from Abubakar Sissoko. Mitch, I know you were watching this game closely as well. This is a lot of fun. We've seen Ottawa talk about their goal of becoming deeper and playing more attacking football. That's exactly what we saw in the second half here.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And, speaking to JD Ulanowski, the general manager before the season, that was the primary goal of this offseason, was to add more depth, and how important that is to success within this league. And, you hear Diego Mejia say after the match, he has 2 players at every position, and that's going to be crucial for them this season. The ability to bring Emir Didic, Manny Aparicio, Abubakar Sissoko off the bench, and the latter, obviously, as you said, scoring the equalizer. I don't think that'll be the plan all season, but the ability to do that shows the depth of this group. And we saw how good David Rodriguez is. Well, they've got 3 more Atlético San Luis players that didn't even feature in this game, and Iker Moreno, Kevin Ortega, and Juan Castro. So there's a lot of talent on this group. There's a lot of depth of talent on this group. And, to see some of the players who maybe we didn't expect, at least immediately, to see play the way that they did in this match, there's a lot to be excited about in this Atlético Ottawa side. And again, quietly had a very good offseason, maybe not as high profile of players as we thought that, as they signed certainly last season, at least in terms of a CPL context, but there's a lot to like about how they built this squad.
Yeah, last year, Atlético Ottawa were the super team, as some dubbed them. They brought in so much talent from elsewhere in the CPL, recognizable names, Manny Aparicio, Emir Didic. Those 2 players were on the bench for this game. I mean, I was at TD Place. There was a little bit of surprise among those who I guess weren't the most in the know, or the closest to the club and the coaching staff, who didn't expect this. Both players had trained the day before. Apparently, Emir Didic had not had a full week of training, had a bit of I believe it was a head injury earlier in the week, so he was taking the time easily. Manny Aparicio felt something, and again, I think it's an Ottawa team in a place where if they didn't have the depth that they have now, Aparicio would have been starting. He would have been good to go. But Mejia spoke after the game about how much a luxury it was for him to be able to bring these players off the bench. He brought Aparicio off the bench. He brought Sissoko off the bench, and Sissoko scored. And to be able to bring those players into a game late when they needed energy, when they were losing, they needed those players. Aparicio has maybe the most energy in the entire Canadian Premier League. So he's maybe the best possible player you can inject into a game like that when you need it. And it worked out. It worked so well. And how many times over the last couple of years have we seen Atlético Ottawa not able to find their way back into games? So many times they would concede after setting up in a more defensive shape, And it's really hard to pull yourself out of that, right? If you're set up to defend and to play a low event style of football, it's really hard to change that mid-game when something doesn't go your way and you find yourself trailing. So, very impressive from Ottawa. And as you mentioned, David Rodriguez, 13 touches in the box this game. That's a tied for an Ottawa club record. I think it's the 8th most in CPL history. This is a guy who comes from that FC Dallas academy and then moved to Mexico where he was obviously born. He's almost Liga MX ready is the thoughts around Atlético Ottawa camp. So they're very excited to have him, and we're very excited to see him. Halifax, though, again, they look like they're going to be a lot of fun this year too. I've got something I want to bring up about their attack, but I think Patrice Geyser maybe explained it best. So I'm going to let him do that first, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we lost some very important players, and it's been a process for us to evolve and look at how we could play differently. And a lot of it has been interchanging players and just allowing them to freedom to make the decisions. We have our principles, and as long as the players are playing within that principle, they have the freedom. And I think because of that freedom, Charlie, it's very hard to predict for an opponent of like patterns that are set, because things are really coming from improv and instincts, which is great for a player. And you could see some of it at display.
Yeah, there's just so much interchange. And Sean Rea talked about the freedom that they have as well in Halifax. Just Mitch, how it was exciting to watch this Halifax team play and watch these players kind of not be in these rigid structures, be able to find the space and go looking for the ball, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we said, there's so much depth of talent in attack for this team, and so many players who maybe we weren't sure exactly how they would set up. And I think that that's a benefit to Halifax as well, because the opponents don't really know what kind of combination they're going to get from, a Probo or a Sean Rea or a Ryan Telfer on any given week, and they can interchange those guys and kind of move them around as they see fit during the game. And to see those guys with confidence, it's so important to get Probo and Rea goals. I think this early in the season, 2 players who, I think will thrive off that kind of confidence. There's a lot to like in the way Halifax were able to attack in this game. Maybe on the defensive side, still some questions. That was a big question from last season, but in terms of the attacking, really a lot to like to start the season for the Halifax Wanderers.
Yeah, and definitely frustrated to give up that 2-goal lead, but it is early in the season. I think the positives from that first hour of the game outweigh the negative the last half hour. And, they even had their chances late in the game after Tier Walker was sent off. They had some chances, but, a lot to like about Halifax. Shout out Isaiah Johnston as well. Welcome back to the CPL. I thought he was impressive in that game. But let's move on to Hamilton. We had our marquee showdown, as it always is, Forge FC, Cavalry FC, at Hamilton Stadium, CPL Final rematch, live on TSN. That game was, as always, a lot of fun. But, Mitch, I think the first half of this game, it was pretty even. Not really a lot to speak about. But the second half, Forge took the lead. They went to 10 men after poor Zane Bruno saw that second yellow card. But we saw Cavalry versus Jassim Kolelat for the rest of it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. 6 saves from Yasin Claylat and a couple of them absolute box office. And a guy who I think was actually pretty close to being in that Golden Glove award conversation last season, but played just 14 games. So I think maybe the sample size wasn't quite large enough. But I mean, some fantastic saves from him. And when they're kind of sorting out their new look backline a little bit, you have a guy like Zane Bruno coming in for his first start with Forge. I just think that having a guy like Kalela back there who can bail you out on a few occasions, that only makes them that little bit more difficult to defeat. So this was a fantastic start to the season for him, and someone who I think will be right up there in the conversation for the Canadian Premier League's goalkeeper of the year at the end of the season.
Yeah, and Cavalry, by the way, set a CPL record with 20 shots in the second half of this game, which is just an insane amount. You might, a more cynical person might point out that only 4 of them are on target, but still an impressive kind of kitchen sink throwing from Cavalry. Didn't quite fall their way. There's some concerns in Cavalry with injuries, right? We heard pregame that Diego Gutierrez is out for a while, Eric Cobbs is out for a while, but I know you noticed that a lot of the new players in Calgary look like they're going to be pretty special for this club this year.
Yeah, I mean, 18 of those shots were after the Mobabuli goal. So they definitely put on a press to get back in this game and were unlucky not to do so. But when you have so many returning players and in a league where everyone really knows each other, I think it is important to have a couple of guys each year that can kind of tweak things and give you a different look. And if there's one overriding positive from this game, it's Mikhail Gerashmenkov coming off the bench and, providing that excellent service and looking incredibly dangerous out wide and what that's going to mean for this team. And Baldissimo as well, looking fantastic, looking the player, that I think we've known through the Whitecaps and San Jose a little bit in MLS, who can just be so good on the ball and control things. And those are going to add this, add a little bit different to this team in terms of what they can do. And that's going to be really, really important for a Cavalry team this season that's trying to live up to the heights of last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gerasimenkov hit the ball a couple times, and sometimes you can just see in the way a player hits the ball, especially from distance, and how cleanly they strike it, that they've got that God-given talent, which is really difficult to teach. And I think we're going to see Gerasimenkov score some incredible goals this year, if that's the way that he's going to be striking the ball consistently. Speaking of striking the ball well, though, let's go to Vancouver Island, where Pacific promised goals this year. They only scored 27 a year ago, and they delivered in game one. We saw some surprises in the way that they set up with their front 3-4. Bustos playing in the middle when he played most of his time for Pacific last time on the right wing. Josh Hurd is kind of central. Ronan Krat and Dario Zanata out wide. It worked, though, Mitch. The magic is back at Pacific.
Yeah, the magic's absolutely back. I mean, how many guys last season would have even tried something like Ronan Krat did to score that incredible second goal for them? And I just think that the way that they attacked every time they were on the ball was decisive. It was with a lot of confidence. Add Marco Bustos into that lineup, and obviously he's going to bring that. Ronan Krat doing the exact same thing. When Pacific's been at their best historically, it's been a lot of this kind of Maverick style attacking football, going forward, taking your chances, trying things. And you really saw that from them, especially in the first half of this game. But throughout, they created a lot of great chances. And I think huge to get Dario Zanata off the mark immediately as well. It took him 17 games last season to score his first goal. Then once he did, he actually leads the team in scoring with 5 goals and 2 assists in his final 8 matches. So to get one immediately is huge for him. And the rest of the attacking group just looks so confident as well. A season removed from obviously scoring the fewest goals in the Canadian Premier League.
And we have to give James Merriman credit here, I think. Last year, a lot of the problems with their attack, we talk about them being indecisive, hesitant, not really having a lot of those runners or even a lot of ideas in the final third last year. And I think this year, Merriman's kind of gone back to the drawing board with the attacking game plan and the strategy. Yes, he's brought in some new talent and at least somebody in Marco Bustos who he knows how to coach, which is always an understated benefit to having a player like that. But it's clear that Merriman has spent some significant time with his staff, working with his team on new attacking patterns and new ways to break teams down, because they've always been good with possession. They've always been good defensively under this coaching staff, but they would get to the edges of the box last year and then kind of run out of room or run out of ideas, or they'd stop or they'd slow down. This year they were dynamic, they were decisive, as you said, and they were aggressive. And early signs are that this might be a Pacific team that is a lot more fun to watch than it was last year. And that's kind of more in line with the tradition and the history of this club, I think. Valour, meanwhile, maybe not so decisive with the ball. They had a lot of the ball. They had some good moments. We saw them playing well with their fullbacks as they did last year. And there's a lot of continuity, I think, in the back for this team. I said maybe the back 6 of this club. But maybe similar to last year's Pacific, once they got it beyond there, not quite in sync, right?
Yeah, I mean, 56.9% of the ball, just one shot on target, and it came late on a Javante Lane volley, especially at a small Starlight Stadium. It's fine to play that way and to have possession of the ball, but you have to have some ideas of what you're going to do with it. And I just don't think they had that nearly enough. And that plays right into Pacific's hands, really, where they can just sit back and absorb pressure and attack you going the other way. And, I think good to see Kian Williams back and healthy. That will be a big help in this regard, and a solution going forward, but maybe just not enough in terms of if you want to be a possession-based team and if you want to have a lot of the ball, with that comes the fact that you kind of miss the opportunity to have some of those transitional opportunities that they've been so good at in the past. And you're going to have to find other ways to create offense because they certainly weren't able to do that consistently enough in this match.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about Valour in that sense, I think. I mean, we look at Kean Williams, and he hasn't played football in a year. Chris Twardek played a lot of last year at right back. He's adjusting to a more attacking role. And there's a lot of, I think a lot of the players who are going to be the biggest difference makers for Valour this year didn't start this game, to be honest. I mean, Diogo Resurrecao was one of their most effective kind of attacking midfield pieces last year. He's on the bench. There's a couple of these other newcomers. Xavi Vincenzao looks good. Bruno Figueiredo. These are players that I think are going to be integrated more slowly. But I think Valour is definitely a team that need to play a bit of a pluckier football. Last year when they were at their best, they were pressing. They didn't necessarily have the ball all that much, but they were deadly on the counter. They were able to punish mistakes, and they were in a lot of respects sometimes the hardest working team in the CPL. It's a lot more difficult it takes longer to establish a more possession-based identity. And if that's the direction that they're going this year, that's very commendable, but it will take some time for that to come together. So I think I'm not particularly worried about Valour in the long run. But there are going to be some growing pains, I think, if that's the kind of football that we are to expect this year, right?
This is far too sensible, Charlie. We're supposed to be overreacting heavily to a one-game sample size.
Yeah,
right
they lost. It's over. It's over. Pack it up. It's over for Valour. But no, it's a team that has ambition, and I think does have the quality to be a playoff team this year. But I think it might take some time.
Yeah, definitely might take a bit of time. I mean, even when you have the same returning group, especially at the start of the season, like it does take time to get back into that competitive rhythm, especially on the road. Starlight's not an easy place to play, so certainly going to take some time for all of these teams. Again, I joke there, but week one, we see a lot of things, a lot of questions get answered, but a lot more kind of get asked after games like this, and I think that goes for every team, not just Valour.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's wrap up the weekend with one of the most interesting games out in Vancouver. Vancouver FC hosting York United. This was, another rainy one. That is, I guess, West Coast weather for you, is that it was very sunny on Vancouver Island the day before, and then it's rainy and horrible in Langley the day after. Poor Alex Gange-Ruzic was at both games for us, so he got the full spectrum of the British Columbia weather. But this is a lot of fun in Langley. I think we have to start with York United, though. This is such a different team, I think, on paper. Obviously, so many Toronto players brought into this club, to the extent that they are perhaps the Toronto's football club in terms of how many local players in this team, including the coaching staff. Mario Stachio's first game as the permanent head coach, is obviously third technically in charge after the interim job for two games last year. It's a club that's set up in a somewhat similar shape to the way they ended last year, which I think was a smart thing to do, not to rock the boat too much. But this is a club that looked like they could be effective this year, Mitch.
Yeah, and credit to their persistence in this game, because when you see Callum Irving make some of the saves that he does early on Massimo Farron and Adonijah Reed, and some of the opportunities, especially on the road, you just wonder if it's not their day. But then, they bring a Julian Altobelli and a Sholajimo off the bench, and immediately these players are able to make an impact and give them the decisive play that they really needed in order to get an important 3 points on the road to start the season. So that's certainly a credit to this team. And yeah, like you said, a lot to like in the way that they're set up for the season. There's a lot of attacking invention and ideas, some really good play through the midfield as well. Elijah Adegubi looks like he's picked up exactly where he left off last season in terms of kind of being that rock in the center for this team. So there's enough pieces, I think, there that were part of the foundation last season. added in with some new ideas. And I think that that's really going to create a good combination of what we were able to see in this first week.
Yeah, it was quite the encore in the first half from York, 10 shots. Shout out Callum Irving, who had 8 saves in this game. Not too far shy of his own CPL record, which I think was 11 in Halifax last year. And were it not for Jason Kalelat also going crazy in Hamilton, Irving would be a pretty easy one to stick in the team of the week. But Eustachio, he sets up this team in a fairly similar back three to what they were comfortable with last year. The personnel are similar. Oswaldo Leon, Niall Higgins, 2 players that were a big part of that playoff run last year, and Luke Singh fits into it very, very smoothly. Sometimes when you're a coach, your players make you look like a genius, and I think there's no better feeling as a coach than in the 65th minute here, where Eustachio brings in Julian Altobelli and Shola Jimo for, I think, Batar and Niger Reed. And like a minute later, Julian Altobelli, his first touch of the game, his first touch with the club, his first touch in the Canadian Premier League, despite this technically being his second CPL contract, goes in the back of the net. It doesn't get much more, super sub than that, right?
No, it certainly doesn't. And a player we knew had the pedigree of scoring goals, scored 11, I believe, last season for Toronto FC2 as their captain in MLS Next Pro. So obviously a player who has that ability, but, again, like you said, just the confidence to be able to do that on your first touch and the second goal as well. I mean, absolutely fantastic to beat his player down the line and then to curl in his shot. This is exciting because obviously when you lose Boba Booley, when you lose Brian Wright over the course of the offseason, Dennis Selenovic, some of these other guys who, played a role in York's attack last season, you start to wonder where the goals are going to come from. And Julian Altobelli wasted absolutely no time in being like, I'll help out there. I think I'll contribute a few this season. So that's a really important question answered early, I think, by this York United side. And obviously it's one game, but it's a great start for the player and for the team.
Yeah, I don't think Altobelli's a player that we were talking about a lot before this season, just because there were so many more CPL proven players that came in, Massimo Ferrin, Gabby Batar, and Naja Reed, these kinds of players that we just knew more about from a CPL sense. But Altobelli is just, as you mentioned, he scored 11 goals for TFC2 last year. He is a player with a lot of talent, and it's very hard to teach that nose for the goal. And really, if you have it at any level, it shows. And I think that's very clear here. 2 goals. Julian Altobelli, by the way, the first player in CPL history to score a brace on opening weekend. I looked that up this morning and was actually a little surprised. But as far as I can tell, it never happened before. So he's off to a strong start in the Golden Boot race in day 1. But that's very, very impressive from Altobelli. And I think very exciting to see just how many options York have this year and how many ways they can change the game. Vancouver, though, this is a frustrating game for them. AGR wrote in his analysis after the game, go check it out at campl.ca, that they have not had a good home record historically. And they wanted to change that this year. And day 1, they have not. You look at the first half, they had 3 shots. They got just 0.14 expected goals. They're eating wave after wave of pressure in the first half at home in the first game of the season. It was a frustrating way to start the game. They kind of started on the back foot, partly because of York's energy, but it looked like it was a bit of a struggle for them to get the ball out of their back, right?
Yeah, it certainly did. And, I think, again, just a group with a lot of changes again this offseason, and it kind of looked like it. We know York obviously had a lot of changes as well, but some of those structural key pieces were still there, and we mentioned how effective they were in this game. But yeah, as you mentioned, they were last in the league last season in terms of home points, and that's really going to be a key point for them this season if they want to improve. That's an easy way in the Canadian Premier League, is home points are critical because there's so much travel, there's so much advantage in home field. That's an easy way for them to pick up and to start the season like they did, and to, I guess, not really be the aggressors at home, to have York be the ones creating so many chances to not, again, look really that decisive in the final third. There are some question marks. Again, I thought their midfield was good, so I think that there is some positives. Mehdi Asusi with a great CPL debut. I think he looks calm and composed on the ball, and there's a lot to like there. And obviously, when you add a guy like Kunle Dadaluk, we know what he brings, but he's certainly out to prove it this season. There was some great battles between him and Massimo Ferrin. That was an awesome week one showdown to watch in terms of his ability to get back and going forward. But it's, they're going to have to put it together sooner rather than later, and especially at home to start to build some of that positive momentum they're going to need if they want to switch things around this season.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot of times. It's very difficult to go on the road in the Canadian Premier League and pick up enough results to be a playoff team, right? We've spoken about that with Halifax before, and the teams that are the most successful are the ones that are rock solid at home. Forge last year were incredible. Cavalry, I think they've lost one regular season game at home in the last 2 years. You cannot be a top team in this league until you've got a very strong home record. And I think that is going to be objective number one for Vancouver. Objective, and maybe the way that they get there, though, is they need to find their strikers. Alejandro Diaz, 24 touches in this game. Terran Campbell, just 14. These are two strikers that have played together before at Pacific, not always in the same starting 11, though. They're both players that want to be central. They want the ball at their feet, and they're players that can pop up in the box well to finish a chance. But it's going to take some time as well, I think, for Vancouver to find where exactly these two players need to be in relation to each other on the pitch. You look at kind of average positions from this game, and they were very close together for a lot of it. I'm not necessarily sure that's what they'll want. Not sure that that's necessarily the plan. They're two players that can play off each other well, but I think need to find their own spaces and need to be able to make their own runs into the box so that they're pulling defenders. One guy needs to attract the attention of a defender so that the other one can get into space in the box. And I think that's going to be, a process of building chemistry that they have from their days of Pacific, but maybe not in this sense. So the Pacific rarely played kind of a double striker setup. When these two were there, it was often either Campbell out on the left or they would kind of platoon with each other, and one would play, and then the other would come off the bench. So I think for them to play together, it's going to be, a process. But certainly there's talent up front, and these two players are competing for the CPL's all-time goals record. I don't know if we're going to stop the game and have the other one give a speech about the other, like they did in the NHL. But
if anyone does a penguin slide, I'll be very impressed. That looks like
exactly. Yeah, I don't know if Terran Campbell is going full slide. He could have in the rain yesterday, to be fair. But anyway, the CPL continues next weekend with just 3 games in match week 2. We're still in Pacific on Saturday as they host Forge. That one's going to be a lot of fun. York United's home opener Sunday afternoon against the Halifax Wanderers. That one's always a lot of fun. And then Vancouver FC at home again, Atlético Ottawa. Traveling on the road, looking to build their away record for the first time this year. Again, a team that is actually often quite good away from home. We're very thankful that you are joining us at the newsroom again. We will be here every Monday, a bit of a shorter show just so we can get through some of the bigger stories around the CPL. As always, make sure that you reach out if there's anything that you want us to discuss or any questions that you have about the CPL. We thank Volkswagen very, very kindly for sponsoring our show again. And we will make sure that we're covering every angle of the Canadian Premier League as it goes forward. So until next week, we hope you enjoy the weekend's games, watch them all on One Soccer, and we will see you next time.
Oh my word!